Andrew is on the line. Andrew, thanks for waiting and thanks for calling. Are you there?
What's up, heathens?
Andrew, what part of Florida?
Miami.
You guys doing okay in Miami? How's it been?
Good, good. The previous hurricane didn't really hit us. Um,
Mhm.
we weren't very affected by it. It's mostly Central and North Florida that got it.
Everybody's watching this new one. I guess it's supposed to strike around, what, Wednesday, something like that? And the path looks
Yeah,
brutal. Looks like the whole freaking state of Florida. So,
yeah. All the different paths show it's gonna hit us pretty like solid. So
yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear about all the troubles in Florida and beyond. What's on your mind, Andrew? What do you want to talk about?
yeah, Godless engineer, because he calls himself a mythicist, he's basically claiming Jesus did not exist. But
I am
but
claiming that. Yep.
throughout his online
It's not.
content, he
It's not.
doesn't
It's
really
not.
provide.
Sorry. I just want to interject. I'm not basically claiming it. I am claiming that.
Right. Right,
Mhm.
and I throughout your online content that I follow, you don't really provide evidence for it. You just debunk evidence
No, no. I do.
for
I
it.
provide evidence.
Okay. Okay. Well, if you provide
What? What?
evidence,
What? What do you want to know? Well, I mean, what I'm asking is, what do you want to know?
okay, because you because debunking that someone ever existed, that it's a logical fallacy to say that there's no evidence for this creature, so it's less
How is that a
likely
logical
than like
fallacy? What logical fallacy is it? Can you name the logical fallacy?
absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
I don't say that.
Right, but that's what we that's a basic
I
concept.
don't say that. So that makes no sense for you to say that I say that.
Okay.
I'm
So I
Yeah.
curious,
mean, do you?
John. Well, let's
Yeah.
flesh this out if I can jump
Mhm.
in.
Yeah.
There
Definitely.
was no Jesus. That's your position?
Mhm. Yep.
Nutshell that for me. There
Oh,
was no
definitely.
Jesus because.
Okay, so there was no Jesus because our earliest reference to Jesus only pictures him as a celestial figure, and then later stories that were concocted are similar to other mystery cults like the Isis and Osiris cult that construct earthly tales of the savior figure in order to entice people into the religion, and then once they get into the religion, they learn the mysteries of the religion, which would be like the celestial stories of the faith. Paul uses a lot of this language. That is utilized by other mystery cults. They Paul only ever identifies Jesus as a celestial figure, and this actually matches up with what other mystery cults were saying at the time. And also, like all of the major claims by Christianity, specifically what Jesus provides Christians that believe in him, are the same things that other mystery cults provide to their adherents. And those mystery cults have mythological figures at the very center of them. And so, just using basic Bayesian, analysis and understanding, we can come to the conclusion that Jesus is a syncretism between Mediterranean mystery cults and Judaism because of the fact that they were expecting a Messiah figure to come and rescue the Jewish people. When that person did not come, they had to figure out a different way in order to understand their religion. And so what they did was they scoured the Old Testament in order to figure out, like, why didn't Jesus come, or did he come, or what information can we know about Jesus. When they did that, they came up with Pesherim in order to explain this archangel figure that was going to save the Jewish people. And what they discovered was that, oh, he's come, he's died, because Satan crucified him in the lower parts of the celestial realm, and then he resurrected back up into the heavens, which is similar to what Jewish philosophers were saying about other figures in Judaism, like Moses. Philo of Alexandria believed that Moses was given a divine body and descended to the earth and accomplished a whole bunch of stuff, and then when he died, he resurrected, or not resurrected, but ascended all the way back up to the upper parts of the heaven. So these are not really kind of crazy ideas about it. This all is in line with what evidence that we have. And so this explanation is supported by mountains of evidence that has been collected, since
And
2014.
that's my fault, Andrew. I teed him up. That's on me. But I'm curious.
Sure.
I find that's
No,
interesting
that
stuff.
that was a good
But do you want to
clarification because
respond to that?
yeah, yeah. Um, I'm not trying to straw man in any way, okay? But basically, if Christians make things up and borrow elements from other religions, that doesn't prove that a man didn't exist. They couldn't create mythologies based on a human historical figure. Um,
Well, okay, I can agree with that. I can agree with that. But my entire spiel there, what Seth asked me to do was to explain one, why I don't think that Jesus was a man, which entails the fact that the earliest references to Jesus are purely celestial references. Like they only figure him to be a celestial, figure that provides these very magical solutions to Jewish problems in the first century. So that's that explanation. But then also on my shoulders is the burden of proof, explaining all of the evidence that we have in Judaism in the first century and in Christianity. And so that was what the Pesherim discussion was concerning Philo and the scouring of the Old Testament in order to generate stories about Jesus and the Cohen's the how Christianity is modeled off of mystery cults. So all of this is relevant to the position because you one have to explain the evidence that we currently have, but you also have to explain how your position could have come about given the evidence that we have.
yeah, all of the earlier sources meet several historical criteria, like multiple attestation, embarrassment, dissimilarity, contextual credibility, and coherence. And even though
No,
the Gospels
no.
contain elements of mythology, they're mostly based on this planet Earth. So you're saying he's a celestial
I
figure.
don't think
Right.
Christianity has any of those things that you listed.
No. I'm sorry. We disagree on your premise there.
Okay. Well, there's multiple attestation.
No, there's not.
Attestation. Okay. Attestation by who?
Okay, Mark,
Nope.
the author of Mark, the author of
Nope.
the
Nope.
Q source. Yeah, those are different
Nope.
people writing about someone named Jesus
Q didn't
and what he said.
exist. Q doesn't exist, and that's a factual statement. Q does not exist. Like the source. So for people that don't understand, Q is a fabricated source that is supposed by some scholars out there as a way to combat the not synaptic, synoptic problem. And the synoptic problem is the fact that the first three gospels that were written, they all coincide with each other. They seem to be copied off of one another in order to reconcile these things. They invented a source called the Q source, and everybody has a different idea of what's in the Q source. And the reason why everybody has a different idea about what's in the Q source is because we don't have the Q source in order to actually state what was in the Q source. So there's no way to know that Q was independent of any other Christian thought. There's also no way to know that Mark was independent of other Christian thought at the time, or that the author of Mark was truly an eyewitness or new eyewitnesses or anything like that. So please try again with multiple attestation.
Well, also too, I mean, Mark has two, if not three authors. None of the authors of any of the Gospels have ever been identified. They are written in the third person. We're talking about long generations after the supposed life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. The events in the
Yeah.
Gospels not corroborated by any contemporary historian. So I reject this idea that it was an authority, any of these writings. So that's just a few of the reasons why we disagree with your premise, Andrew.
Well, I never said it was an eyewitness. I said that those are different sources that mention a figure named Jesus. Just because it was
Right,
40 years
and
after
who
does
what
not prove that
but
Jesus
so,
didn't
so in
exist. I
historical
can write a
so
book
so
a couple of generations later. It doesn't mean that the person didn't exist. I didn't say it was an
If
right,
eyewitness.
but
you
basic
write several books generations later and you happen to have commonalities in your story, does that mean that that story is true?
No, but it also has differences that contradict each
Okay,
no
other,
so
and so that gets to the criterion of
go ahead, John. Go ahead,
dissimilarity and
buddy.
embarrassment. That
No,
Yeah.
okay. So before we
At
get
the
to criterion of similarity and embarrassment, I want to go back to this idea of Mark being independent of Q. Well, like we already said that Q is fabricated, so there's no way to know if that truly is independent. But also, I don't think that there's any way that you can truly show that Mark is independent of anything, or that Mark got his information independently, of the Christian movement at the time. What was the source for Mark's gospel? Can you tell me who the source was?
No, nobody can,
Right, exactly. How can you say that it's independent of anything if you don't know what the sources that were used are?
because it is a literary text written by an individual containing oral tradition from stories that were circulating at that time. And so it has to
How
be written
how
by
is this how
somebody,
is this
and we assume and
okay,
we know
so
that somebody was a Christian.
right, so
Yes or no?
how does this how does this tie us to history? How do we know one where this information came from, two if this information is reliable, and three that it wasn't fabricated?
Can you repeat the three again? The three questions.
Okay, so the three would be like where did this information come from? Do we know that it's independent? And then how do we know it wasn't fabricated?
Where did it come from?
Right.
Um, how do we know it wasn't fabricated?
Right.
And the second one,
Uh, like, I mean, at this point, I can't remember. Like, I listed them off twice. I mean,
sorry, I just said
ultimately,
okay,
okay.
okay.
So
Where did it
ultimately,
come
what we
from?
need to
Let me
do,
just
hold on. Ultimately, what we need to do is suss out between firsthand eyewitness testimony about Jesus and fabrication. Can you give us a good methodology for differentiating between historical fiction and Mark and historical fact?
yeah, I just gave you several. But
No, you
so
didn't.
here's one. Okay, criterion of coherence.
Coherence. What do you mean? Criterion of coherence.
Certain facts about Jesus and other figures are established through other criteria. So it's established by
No,
this.
so you're basically piggybacking off of other criteria that also don't establish the existence of Jesus. Really? Can you name some of these underlying
Criterion of
criteria that you
there's
think?
okay, contextual credibility. This states that it fits within the historical and cultural context of first century Palestine. There are many messianic figures
Okay, yeah,
claiming
so-
making similar statements that Jesus did, and so it's more
right, right.
likely
So,
that
so
this was just a person that did that because many people did that. That's like saying, "Oh, this he was a soldier in World War I that killed people." There were many soldiers in World War I that killed people.
right. But I mean, just because somebody has written something that seems to like to be placed in a certain time in history does not necessarily mean that it's historical. So that particular criteria is out the window. Do you want to try criterion of embarrassment? How about the Aramaic criteria? This whole idea that in like the Gospel of Mark and other Gospels, there are certain phrases that are better understood in Aramaic versus Greek, as well as Aramaic directly being integrated into the Gospel. Do you want to try that one?
No, because I'm not really familiar with it. So, but
Okay,
you
so
said
you're
where did it
telling
come
me that
from?
I know your position better than you do. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, no.
No.
I'm saying that you you need to provide evidence to the contrary. Because saying you don't know where it came from, the source
No.
Mark
I'm
doesn't
saying that
disprove that
your
Jesus didn't
criteria.
exist.
No. Hold on. I'm saying that your criteria doesn't actually prove the things that you think that they prove. I'm providing you with reasons why they don't actually prove it. So if you want to talk about like some of this other criteria that you're using to piggyback onto this criteria of coherence, I'm perfectly fine talking about it. But I can guarantee you, you're not going to have a fun time.
I'm having a fun time.
No, I'm saying you're not going to have a fun time if you start
Okay,
bringing up like the criteria of embarrassment.
okay. I brought up multiple attestation, and I've given you several examples. But
No. So I responded. I said that it's not multiply attested, and the reason why it's not multiply attested is that we have an author that wrote Mark, and there were several authors also that contributed to Mark. But we have this author that we're calling Mark, the author of Mark. He got his information from elsewhere. We don't know where because there's no source information on it, which is distinctly different from other historical writings at the time, like historical biographies and everything like that. So we don't have Mark as independent attestation. Q doesn't exist, so that doesn't work. M doesn't exist. That's another fabricated source. That doesn't work. I don't know if you've heard about that one. L, that one also doesn't exist. We've had to fabricate information that is supposedly in L. So what we have is Mark being the seed for all the other gospels that exist. That includes Matthew, Luke, and John. John definitely knew the other gospels. So all we have are
May I
Paul's
respond to
epistles,
that?
and then we have, huh?
May I respond to that briefly?
Sure. So, just to recap here, to keep us on track, no multiple attestation. Mark is the first gospel written, and all other gospels copy from Mark, and there's no other attestation to the historical or the earthly tales of Jesus.
Okay. M and L, M and L contain material not found in Mark, not found in the Q sections, whether it exists or not, whether it existed or not. And so you're saying they're not independent. But if they're not from Mark,
I'm
why
saying
do
that
you
they
say
don't exist, so there's no way for us to determine independence.
they're not from Mark though, right?
No, I'm saying that M and L do not exist, and so they are therefore not independent because they do not exist. It's a lot like me saying that a mouse is independent of everything, but this mouse is also like, I don't know, played the Joker in the newest Joker movie. Like that mouse does not exist because that did not happen. The same thing with M and L. Those things, as far as we can tell, did not exist at any point in history.
That's a positive claim, and you need to provide evidence for that. You can say we don't
So
have
you
them,
complained about me
but we
saying
do have
absence of evidence is not
information
evidence of
given.
absence, right? My complaint is still the same. You're proclaiming that M&L do exist. You need to provide the evidence that they actually do exist instead of just providing claims that they do exist, which are claims that are made by scholars, admittedly, but they've had to fabricate these sources in order to solve the synoptic problem. But the fair error hypothesis, if you've ever heard of that, actually establishes that Mark is the seed gospel and that Matthew copied from Mark and then Luke copied from Matthew and Mark and then John. What this is outside the fair error hypothesis, but John actually had access at least to Luke, which if he had access to Luke, then he had access to the other gospels. So it seems to be like Mark is the seed gospel for all of the earthly tales of Jesus. So you have a single attestation to the earthly tales of Jesus.
Okay, we have evidence because it's literally in the gospel itself. We have material from Matthew.
Andrew, it's
Okay.
been a joy, and I appreciate your call very much. It's, I mean, I've got goosebumps. I'm riveted by these arguments. John, do you care if we move on to our final caller? I mean, are you good with that?
No. I feel like Andrew's not listening to me, and he's just repeating things that he's read either off of Bart Ehrman's website or other author's website, and so he doesn't really have a really fleshed out idea of his own position. That is just how I feel about it.
The reason you feel he wasn't listening, I think, is because he wasn't listening. I just don't get multiple attestation. Okay, fine. What does that prove? And then I heard authoritative in there, and I tried to address that, and he skipped right over it. Well, someone explain authoritative to me. And beyond the rest of it, it became so not even esoteric, but just word salady. I thought maybe we should move on to our final call.
Thank you for watching that clip. If you enjoyed it, perhaps you should join us.
Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
At patreon.com/calltheline.